And now joining us for the program is Mr. Mike Billington, Asia editor at Executive Intelligence Review, joining us from Hamilton, Virginia, and Mr. William Jones from the Executive Intelligence Review, joining us from Leesburg, Virginia. Gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you both to the program. Now, this is an ongoing thing, and it's not the first time that the East has basically lambasted the West for not living up to its disarmament obligations. And meanwhile, we know very well that we had former U.S. President Barack Obama actually got a Nobel Peace Prize because he vowed to disarm something he did not. He actually added and revitalized the U.S. nuclear stockpile. Ironic, but here we are, the U.S. accused of condemning China for exactly this same issue. I guess we'll start with you, Mr. William Jones. Welcome to the program. Your initial thoughts on this?
Well, obviously, what the United States is doing is using every means of trying to attack China on this non-proliferation issue is so ridiculous. I mean, they have been talking about getting a nuclear non-proliferation agreement with Russia and China. China has very few nuclear weapons compared to both Russia and the United States, and China has simply said, "Well, look, this is ridiculous. We are not moving greatly to become as strong as the United States and Russia in terms of nuclear weapons. So why should we join such an agreement?" China is moving forward on this, but there's no aggressive policy with regard to that. They are concerned with their defense situation, probably more so today than ever before, because of the amount of weapons that the United States and other Western countries are pouring into Ukraine, creating the danger of a nuclear war. So they're probably more inclined towards doing that because of U.S. policy rather than against it. But the claims that the U.S. makes with regard to their not adhering to a non-proliferation agreement is the United States does not have a non-proliferation agreement to them. They are maintaining their limited nuclear resources on the basis of their own national interest. If the United States would agree to a nuclear agreement, they would have to do it with Russia as well, and they're not going to do that now. So it's all a tempest in a teapot, and is used in the same way that human rights in Xinjiang and Hong Kong and all these other issues are used to really kind of attack China. So I don't think it's really taken seriously by the Chinese nor by the world, except as another attack from the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Jones there. Mr. Mike Billington, welcome to the program, sir. Now, I looked up this issue, how long it stretches back for quite a while. In 2019, Mr. Billington, this is according to the United Nations website here, I'm looking at, that the U.S. is undermining global stability by not meeting arms control, disarmament obligations. China and the Russian Federation representatives tell the first committee at the United Nations, China's representative said that by lowering the threshold for the use of nuclear weapons and by turning outer space and cyberspace into new battlegrounds, U.S. has severely undermined global strategic stability. Uncertainty, meanwhile, prevails after the U.S. scrapped the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, and as questions hover over the future of the treaty between the U.S. and the Russian Federation on measures for the further reduction and limitation of strategic offensive arms. That's the New START Treaty. Now, voicing opposition as well as the U.S. deployment of intermediate range missiles in the Asia Pacific, he said all states should abandon Cold War thinking, enhance mutual trust and coordination, jointly maintain strategic balance and stability, and lower the risk of nuclear war, something we have yet to see. Your initial thoughts on this, Mr. Billington?
Well, Bill Jones is one of my associates at EIR, and I totally agree with everything he just said as well. But on the nuclear war issue, I think those statements you just read are absolutely right. We have a situation where the confrontation over Ukraine really has nothing to do with Ukraine, just as the confrontation over Taiwan is not really about Taiwan. America doesn't give a damn about Ukraine or Taiwan. What they care about is that the whole Western financial system is in a state of hyperinflationary collapse, and they see Russia and China being forced by these insane sanctions against Russia and China to pull together a new global financial system independent of the dollar, which is used to impose these devastating sanctions on them. So the problem is that we have some madness within the U.S. military and political leadership. The head of our Strategic Command, Admiral Richard, last summer said that he thinks that while nuclear war was considered unlikely in the past because of the rise of China, it's now likely. These are madmen. And you had Biden's, one of his closest friends, the senator from Delaware, where Biden is from, Coons, who over the last couple of days has said we should be sending troops into Ukraine, which means a war with China and a war with Russia. And obviously the intention here is to do whatever's necessary to destroy this emerging policy between Russia and China. And now, as you probably know, India has basically broken out of the partial containment and begun to work closely with Russia and even with China to put together a new global financial system independent of this City of London and Wall Street, and hopefully in a way which our organization, the Schiller Institute, which held an extremely important conference just a week ago on April 9th, pulling together leading people from Russia and from China, one of the leading economists from China, Justin Lin, and from India and from South Africa, basically saying that we have to build a new strategic and development architecture for all countries that includes the United States and Europe in what is an emerging new paradigm led by China with close collaboration from Russia through the Belt and Road program. And it's this that's the target by these insane and illegal sanctions being imposed, thousands of them against Russia, and that is obviously already many sanctions thousands against Russia in the current phase, but also many against China, and that's liable to increase very rapidly when they accuse China of not going along with the isolation and demonization of Russia, which of course they will not do. So the danger of nuclear war is extremely serious, and the only way it's going to be circumvented is to end this division of the world into warring blocs, as the British Empire has always desired, the East versus the West, and to bring about some sanity within the US and the UK and Europe towards the idea that we don't want to see the human race exterminated in a nuclear war. And to do that, we're going to have to put this Western financial system through bankruptcy reorganization and put together a competent global policy of the sort that Lyndon LaRouche spent his life fighting to put in place.
All right, gentlemen, let's take some social media reactions to the story here on Press TV. Now, Carnegie Endowment says arms control will not eliminate all military competition nor all the risks associated with the U.S.-China competition, but it does offer a way to mitigate the confrontation's most dangerous aspects. Centrist Pete says if world peace is possible, China and the USA have a unique opportunity to achieve it in this century. They're both too powerful. China and the USA should be the stewards of peace. And a spokesperson says the U.S. should stop the hypocritical practice of expanding unilateral military superiority in the name of arms control. Okay, so Mr. Mike Bilting, is that what the U.S. is doing? Is the U.S., according to this last one, the U.S. should stop the hypocritical practice of expanding unilateral military superiority in the name of arms control? We know this beef with China when it comes to the so-called arms control beef. It's not trade, it's not intellectual property. This is something very serious. To Mr. Billington's point, your final thoughts, please.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of these are subterfuge. None of it has anything to do with the actual problem. The problem is that the U.S. knows that it's in a state of economic disintegration and cultural disintegration, and that by and large, the vast majority of the citizens of the United States and the UK and Europe know that their leadership has failed utterly. They don't quite know what to do, but they do recognize that there's something very strange when the entire Western world is in a state of economic disintegration, while China and Russia, but especially China, has performed an economic miracle, has continued to develop and grow during the pandemic and during this confrontation. And they're taking that development policy to the nations of Africa and South America and Asia. We have to bring the Western world out of its madness, out of the madness of its leadership. And the vast majority of the population will support a policy of working hand in hand with Russia and China and India and Africa and South America for development if we can break through this drive for war. At this point, there's almost nothing left in the arsenal of the Anglo-American financial cartel other than war. And we simply have to stop that. That would be potentially the end of civilization. So it requires that we bring sanity into the leadership in the West.
Thank you, Mr. Billington. And Mr. William Jones, final thoughts with you, sir. Are you concerned at all that we're going to ultimately see the use possibly of a nuclear weapon again in our lifetime?
Well, the danger is great given what is going on in Europe today. With regard to the other question, negotiations between China and the United States on limiting nuclear arms, I don't think that's going to happen because of the contrast between how few nuclear arms China has and how much the United States has. Chinese have said, is the United States going to reduce their armaments down to our level, and then we can discuss these issues? That's really the question that has to be asked. And the problem that you have with China reacts to what's happening in the environment. They do not have an aggressive attitude towards this. They're not trying to take over the world in contrast to what U.S. propaganda has been saying. But they will react to what they feel are dangers against their national existence. And to the extent that the United States continues intensifying these so-called freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea and containing China by a system of alliances, which is looking more and more like an Asian NATO, then you will probably have a much greater emphasis on nuclear arms because that is a nuclear power which is threatening the People's Republic of China. And they really have to take the measures to counter that. If you really want nuclear arms reduction, then the United States has got to take the first step. And they can take the first step in coming back to agreements with their counterpart, which is Russia. But they're not prepared to do that today because they have a policy now of trying to destroy Russia. So that is the basic problem they're facing. And the Chinese are watching and waiting, and they also feel the danger in their own region, and that's probably making them become a little more attentive to their nuclear armaments than would have been the case otherwise.
And for our viewers, to Mr. William Jones's point, the U.S. and Russia have over 4,000 nuclear warheads. China only has a few dozen, so it's really a drop in the bucket to exactly what he was saying. Gentlemen, I want to thank you both for joining us on the program. Mr. Mike Billington out of Hamilton, Virginia. Mr. William Jones there joining us out of Leesburg, Virginia. And viewers, that's a wrap for this segment of your Press TV's News Review program. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye for now.